is the latest live-action Disney remake to be coming to theaters. This is more in line with Maleficent, though, where it's more so a reimagining of a villain's origin story or backstory. Before she became Cruella de Vil, her name was Estella. As a young woman, she was a grifter. She was a petty thief who wanted to be a fashion designer, but unfortunately life has handed her a raw deal, and she's been forced to make friends with these thieves, Jasper and Horace. They've become a tight-knit family, but through some circumstances, her fashion flair catches the eye of the Baroness, a leading woman in the fashion industry played by Emma Thompson. She gets a job working for her, and at first it seems like she could be a good role model for Estella. This is exactly what Estella wants to be, but then she learns some things about the Baroness, and without spoiling, it sets her on a vengeance path against her. When this movie was first announced, it was kind of like an immediate, I'm not really interested in this kind of feeling, because number one, I've seen a lot of Disney remakes in the past couple years, and some of them are okay, and some of them are pretty bad. Even movies that maybe could benefit from a reimagining didn't really pan out in their live-action remake. And number two, I just always had this thought in my mind, like, if you're gonna make a backstory for the woman who wants to skin puppies to make a coat in the original cartoon, then maybe this shouldn't be at Disney. Like, maybe this should be at another studio, so maybe they can lean more into like an R rating or something like that. I didn't really have good thoughts about this movie beforehand, but then things started to change once the marketing was coming out. Like, the trailer looked alright, and I was like, who's behind this movie anyways? And I noticed a lot of talent that I didn't remember hearing before, like Craig Gillespie, director of I, Tonya, was directing this movie. I love I, Tonya. That's really great to hear that he's directing this. One of the writers is Tony McNamara, who not only wrote The Favorite, which Emma Stone is also in, but also had a hand in writing The Great, which is a show I watched last year that was pretty good. The score was going to be composed by Nicholas Britell. The cinematographer also worked with Craig Gillespie on I, Tonya, and it already looked like a really gorgeous movie. I was starting to get more interested in seeing the film, especially in like the last week when I rewatched the original cartoon, and I've come to realize that it's not my favorite. It's kind of okay. I don't really love it. Aside from the fun animation, the only characters that I really liked are Jasper, Horace, and Cruella de Vil. They were really fun. So I was actually getting more excited to see this because it was potentially leaning in on the only things I found interesting in that 101 Dalmatians cartoon. Those characters, how they kind of got their start and how they became working together in a life of crime, pretty much. The first thing I wanted to talk about just right off the bat, because it's the thing everyone's going to be talking about, is the fashion design. It is absolutely stunning. Every single outfit looks amazing. You know, like, it would be a shame if the Cruella movie didn't have good fashion, so I'm glad that every single costume looked amazing, and they all vary as far as what they are. It's really, it's a smorgasbord of different styles and fashion, and it all looks fantastic. Everything that's practical in this movie, like the set design even, the makeup, and especially the costumes, everything that's real and tangible looks fantastic. Like, there's one part where Emma Stone comes out of like the dumpster in like a newspaper dress or something like that, and it was like, that looks pretty cool. You know, she's in the middle of all this garbage, but then a garbage truck starts to drive by, she hangs onto it, and this garbage that's around her is actually like a train on the back of her, and I was like, that looks amazing. Like, that's amazing. There's a lot of great stuff like that in this movie. It's one of those things where everything practical about this movie looks so good that you immediately start to get disappointed when you see CGI. Like, there's some very obvious kind of green screen stuff that happens near the third act of this movie. Like, at first it starts off okay, but it kind of gets to a point where it's like, oh, I can tell that we're in front of a green screen right now. And every single scene with a Dalmatian, I believe they were CGI. Which was disappointing. There are real dogs that they use to shoot with this movie, but even then they have to CG them sometimes so they can do certain things, and every single Dalmatian is CGI, I'm pretty sure. It looked very distracting. So I'm grateful that there's a lot of good practical things to be visually dazzled by. Craig Gillespie does a really great job behind the camera here. I thought he had a really great artistic drive behind every single scene in this movie. You know, everything feels purposeful. You know, he really has an eye for what kind of story he's telling and how he wants to execute it, how he wants to execute every single scene. There's a couple times where I maybe had like a couple gripes with the editing, like you'll start one scene with a specific needle drop, and then it feels like immediately after there's another scene just setting up a needle drop, and then immediately after that there's another scene setting up a needle drop. And as much as this soundtrack is great, there's a great selection of songs on here, and I think the vibe and the tone fits with a lot of the scenes they're doing. There's a lot of great high energy in this movie. It's very fast-paced, just considering the runtime, I did start to notice like, okay, this feels like you're just putting in a song now. And then there's even some points because Cruella is narrating where I thought you can probably edit out some of these lines she's saying and just let these scenes kind of breathe a bit and just have those live out instead of Cruella going like, and this is when da 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 da. Everything about this movie technically I thought really worked out. Like, you know, the direction, the cinematography, the musical score even by Nicholas Britell, even though there is a lot of needle drop soundtrack moments in this, there's plenty of times where the score by Nicholas Britell gets to shine and it sounds really great. I'm glad that he was behind this because I really do like his sound here. As someone who is, in rewatching it, not really a big fan of the 101 Dalmatians cartoon, I really did like the way they crafted the story here because they took specific elements that I did like about that cartoon, those characters, those three characters, and brought a lot of their core essentials here, but also doing something interesting with them too. There's a lot of points here where they completely contradict the original cartoon, but I think a lot of that is kind of intentional because they're trying to create something with a little more layers, something a little more complex and interesting, just doing a completely different take in general. And I really liked that. I really did like the way this story was written out. I know a lot of people are sharing clips out of context of like something that happens in the beginning, and people on Twitter are going like, I can't believe this is the reason that she da 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 da. I won't spoil it, but honestly, when you watch it in context with the movie, that's actually not the answer for why she wants to do this thing she wants to do in the cartoon. It honestly isn't that at all. In fact, you don't even get the sense that she might even potentially want to. Like, honestly, like, it does not feel like it could perfectly flow into that cartoon. It feels like this is just its own thing that just so happens to have the character of Cruella de Vil, but they're doing something completely different. They're literally reinventing her. And I love that, and it's all the more better because of the fantastic performances in this movie. Every single actor, I think, did a really great job with their roles. First off, Emma Thompson steals this movie. She is absolutely wonderful in this. She's a very just like straightforward, queen mean, like ruthless kind of character. But Emma Thompson, she just, oh my god, she delivers her lines with such delicious evilness that it's just hard not to start rooting for her, even though she's an absolute like monster of a human being. But she's just so good at being bad, you know, and watching her, like, your eyes are just instantly drawn to her. She's amazing in this movie. But you also get the fundamental flaws behind her character too. Like, okay, you've shut yourself off from these other emotions that make you human, and you're just completely embraced the bad corporate energy that you need to in order to thrive, and you're just so desperately clinging on. I totally got that, and I really enjoyed the Baroness as a character. Jasper and Horace, played wonderfully by Joel Fry and Paul Walter Hauser, are a great comedic foil here. I think they had some really good banter back and forth, especially Paul Walter Hauser, who's an absolute blast in this movie. I thought those two really nailed it, but they also added in some humanity. You know, they're not just bumbling idiots, although it was fun to see them as bumbling idiots, and that's it in the original cartoon. It was nice to see those characters that I enjoyed have a bit more backing them dramatically, because it made me all the more engaged. Which leads me to Cruella de Vil, which, hey, classic cartoon villain. She's excellent in the cartoon, and even Glenn Close does a good job portraying her. But at the end of the day, if you really want to analyze her as a character, it is a very like simplistic, like, I just want to steal these puppies and make a fur coat out of them, so I'm going to kidnap them from their owners and gotta get them back because they're escaping. It's a very kind of like simple character that's elevated because of the character design and the voice actress at the time, and then of course Glenn Close in that movie. But it's a very kind of simple Disney villain. This movie takes that and is like, we want a lot of the same mannerisms. We want a lot of the core essentials of her character, but we want to add in more. We want to give her a more complex story. And I think they pulled it off. This is my definitive version of Cruella de Vil, if I'm being honest. I really loved Emma Stone's take on this character. Her performance is excellent in this movie. I like the way she transforms from Estella and also having this persona of Cruella de Vil. I think it all kind of made sense too, especially as the story progresses. Like, I think this all kind of lines up, what you're doing here, what you're trying to do. I think it's really making sense to me. It's not something that felt forced. I thought everything kind of played out the way it should have. So there's a lot backing this movie that I really enjoyed. It really did feel like Craig Gillespie wanted to come in and shake things up as far as the Disney reimaginings go, the live action remakes go, and he actually offered up a lot that I really enjoyed. Unfortunately, there are things that do kind of bog this down, and I can't blame it on Craig Gillespie at that point. At this point, I think it's more of a Disney thing that ultimately gets in the way, the studio execs coming in and going like, well, why don't we do this? Let me explain. Well, first off, there's a couple moments where they try to be a little more comedic by having certain, like, small appearance characters come in and just act over the top, kind of like obnoxious, and sometimes that was funny, but for the most part I was kind of like, can we like tone it down and like not do that, because it wasn't really working for me comedically. I already mentioned like some of the editing and like some CGI work earlier too, but in addition to that, there's like some weird story inclusions that I thought, this is probably just here for the audience. It feels like there's a character that's name dropped and he appears from the cartoon, and I was like, okay, I didn't know this guy was going to be in this movie, but all right, like what's his point? And then he kind of doesn't. He kind of leaves immediately in the next scene that he's in, and it just felt like they needed that character because cartoon. You know, the cartoon, we got to have this person here. There's a moment where Emma Thompson says something very definitively, like, this just happened. And it's something that you might expect if you are a fan of the cartoon, but then it turns out that didn't actually happen. But there's no like reaction from Emma Thompson like, oh, I guess I was wrong, or like they don't really play into that idea all that much except for like a throwaway line. And it's just, it felt kind of unnecessary, and it just felt like something like we need to put the audience in some kind of weird moral discomfort for a second, even though it's not true. But all those things I just mentioned, those were kind of it as far as like my issues with the movie goes. I was walking out as soon as the credits started to roll, and I was like, this is like a pretty solid B. Like, this is definitely one of the better live action Disney remakes that we've gotten. It's really fun to watch. And it wasn't until I got home when I realized that there is a mid-credit scene in the movie, and I was like, fuck, I walked out of the theater and I missed it, so I had to watch it after the fact. And when I watched it, I was like, huh, what a difference a minute of footage can make to your movie, especially for the ending. Because even though the movie ends in a place where you're like, this can kind of go anywhere, it doesn't have to flow into the original cartoon. In fact, I don't even see how it could. So I'm glad they didn't hint at that too much. This mid-credit scene kind of, it kind of does. Like, they try to heavily imply something like this is now leading directly into the cartoon. I won't spoil what it is, but I found it didn't make any sense to me. It was a little too stupid considering the character that we now see as Cruella. And even in this mid-credit scene, they throw in something that contradicts a moment in the cartoon once again. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is a misdirect thing. Like, they're putting this in just because, like, hey, cartoon, but maybe they have, like, a different vision of the interpretation of the scene, or maybe this is hinting at another project where they do something completely different that's not like the cartoon. You know, maybe that's what it is. I'm looking at it I'm looking at it with a different interpretation. But then I thought back to a line that was thrown out by one of the characters before the credits rolled. And I thought about that, and at the time I thought it was just kind of a random line to put in, but now that I've seen this mid-credit scene and seeing what they're intentionally trying to imply, this line starts to make a whole lot of sense in addition to that. So I feel like Disney just thought, we need to make this seem like it's going to seamlessly flow into the cartoon. But for some reason, they just didn't notice that they've already made so many other artistic changes to the story and the material that it doesn't really match up anymore. And trying to tie them together is kind of bullshit. Legit, when I walked out of the theater, not seeing the mid-credit scene, I was thinking, cool new take. I'm glad they went in the direction they did. I like this version better. This character version and just the story as a whole better than the original cartoon and even the live action 101 Dalmatians remake they did. But then they throw in this mid-credit scene and I'm like, you kind of lost a lot of goodwill. I can't blame Craig Gillespie because this feels like something Disney would do. I don't mean to like conspirize because I can't prove it. I didn't see a Disney exec come in and mess with Craig Gillespie's plan, his vision here, but I mean, if you look at the other Disney remakes, a lot of their other movies, these problems tend to track and it all ends up here. I can say though that this movie is entertaining enough and the acting is just so good from everyone. It's already just such a fun story on its own that this mid-credit scene didn't completely derail the entire experience that I just had. There's still a lot of fun to be had looking at the costumes, hearing the score and the soundtrack, and just seeing these actors play off each other devilishly well, especially Emma Thompson and Emma Stone. But over the course of the movie, there are these issues that do pop up that feel very Disney. And that's what I'm not a fan of. I wish Disney just had more faith in Craig Gillespie and his vision with this movie, with this take on the character. But it just felt like they ultimately didn't want to commit, so they put in something that, you know, if they want to make more of these, it can go kind of either way. I don't know. It was just kind of frustrating. I'm going to give Cruella a B-. Overall, I had a good time with this movie. There's a lot to like here. I just wish that some of the mistakes made on this production weren't, you know, they were kind of fixed, because they're easy fixes. Very easy things that you can do to make this an all-around top-tier kind of movie, especially for a Disney remake. But unfortunately, the only thing getting in the way of Disney and creatives working for Disney is Disney themselves. But what else is new? But if you've seen Cruella, leave in the comments below what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.